We interviewed
A
science journalist with a background in mechanical engineering.
Physics
In
the job.
Wait, just a minute.
Hey. Oh, stop.
Oh! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Hello.
Hi.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Erin Winnick. I have a background in mechanical engineering, but I'm currently working for MIT as the space reporter for the publication.
Wonderful. I'm Brian. This is my partners Michael and Ethan.
Hi.
So in my role, I do kind of balance some daily stuff and then some longer term projects that I'm working on. It ranges from looking through a lot of scientific journals that have some interesting research coming out and reaching out to the researchers and scientists that are working on it, to going out and finding some bigger, longer term stories, some larger areas within my beat or my area of expertise that I think would be worth telling. And usually try to find some human aspect of the story or the right people to tell that story about science or engineering through. So a lot of my daily work is reading a ton of stuff that's online, talking to people for trying to find stories, and then interviewing a lot of people for those stories once I find them.
All right, cool. Awesome.
So I have a background in engineering, and people always thought I was the weird engineer who liked to write. You know, it's not necessarily stereotyped that everyone knows how to do that. So I think that the main thing is helping communicate these science and engineering concepts. You know, it's not all scientists or engineers have that expertise or even need to have that expertise, but you do need to have someone that then can share that with the general public so people can understand what's going on and then also value the work that's happening. It can also help scientists, get more grants and even find out the ones that maybe aren't doing things correctly, kind of that check and balance that journalism helps provide.
Of course, it requires a heavy background in science, physics included, being able to explain these concepts to your readers, right?
Yeah, definitely. So there are people in science journalism that only have a journalism background, but I think it's been a huge advantage to me to have the engineering knowledge, especially because I can just talk to the engineers on a different level. Sometimes, engineers will talk in a lot of jargon, and even if they say that, I can then help translate that because I understand the topics. So it's been a really big advantage to me, especially writing about things that I know a lot about, like 3D printing and manufacturing and the space program, all things that I have a science background, and it definitely helps me be able to write explainers and get it across to the reader. It depends on where you work for that one. Some places are more embracing of, new technologies to be able to tell these stories, but I have some colleagues that have done some really interesting data journalism, even using AI to tell stories about AI. If you know what the archive is, it's a big database of like science papers, and one of my colleagues, Karen, used like an AI scraper to dig out like keywords from all of them to be able to look at the trends in AI. So it's really cool to be able to see some of the technologies that we're writing about actually be able to be used to then tell the stories too. Yeah, so in college I actually had 4 engineering internships. I worked for a civil engineering company that did sinkhole inspection. I worked for John Deere as a manufacturing engineer. I worked for Caterpillar on tooling for creating turbines. And I worked for Keysight Technologies, which is an electronic testing equipment company, helping with some of their robotics testing stuff. Then I also started a company that does 3D printing, science and engineering inspired jewelry, which I still run that on the side too I use a lot of computer aided design, and I have a couple 3D printers at my house and do some metal 3D printing for that.
Oh, it's really sick. Really sick.
Yeah, it definitely ranges on which one. So a lot of the manufacturing related stuff, which is kind of what my focus is on, was understanding a lot of the physics of, the different forces that are put on different parts of products. When you have to do a lot of static analyses on the different things that you're creating to make sure that you secure them properly during different manufacturing processes, or that the stuff that you're creating will actually be able to hold the force of things later on. So in college in mechanical engineering, we do a lot of things that deal with static loads and then moving loads. So there was a lot of calculations based on, whether it's going to be a human hand that's handling something versus a robot that's handling something, and what the final use case is going to be.
Aaron's job at mechanical engineering was basically analyzing the forces on an object, or specifically the product she was involved making, and to make sure that the forces the person using the product wouldn't accidentally break it, and to basically make sure that the forces placed on it wouldn't immediately destroy it.
And then in my current job, the main use for it is honestly a lot of learning about these physics concepts and then be able to explain them. And for me, it's been a lot of astrophysics stuff in my current job. Sure. So some of my internships, for example, at John Deere, I think a lot of people think that like autonomous vehicles are so far off, but I mean, autonomous tractors are already out there in the fields, and it's something that it's interesting to be able to see some of these technologies apply in industries in different ways, because it's different when you're looking at something that's going to be applied in a business context rather than something like you or I are going to use like on the streets. And then in my personal field right now, space reporting, I mean, there's so much happening with as far as privatization of space and so many different, rocket companies. There's obviously SpaceX, which is the one everyone's heard of, but there's a ton of smaller companies like Relativity Space, which is working on trying to 3D print an entire rocket, or Rocket Lab out of New Zealand, Vector Space, Firefly. It's just a huge ecosystem, and it's really interesting to see how that new space industry is expanding.
Awesome, great, thank you.
So for mechanical engineering, I have my bachelor's from University of Florida, and that was the main thing. I decided not to go on for my graduate degree at the time just because I had a lot of stuff going on that I just kind of like followed one thing right after the other, ranging from starting my company to I got actually an internship at The Economist in the science and technology section. And so I kind of followed my path. Something I'm actually, in a couple of weeks, I'm moving jobs. I'm actually going to become a science communications specialist for the International Space Station in a few weeks. So I've had like kind of a lot of opportunities coming one right after the other, but I would like to go back and try to get some type of master's in a more technical area once again. For this, I actually don't have any actual communications degree, and I say I've really pretty much learned on the job for that sort of stuff. Yeah, so there's actually, you can get a professional engineering certification. I didn't. A lot of the people that do that work for consulting firms or for like government jobs. So like civil engineers have to go through the professional engineer certification. And a lot of people that are going to work for, say, like Department of Defense contractors and things like that. But I didn't have to do that. And I'd say there was definitely some of my colleagues that did, but I wouldn't say it's a majority. It just depends on the career path that you want. Other than that, it was mainly like, AP exams in high school and then all my final exams in college. So, I mean, I think the biggest, there's obviously the soft skills of being able to really relate to people and talk to them and, being able to kind of cut through the jargon and stuff. As far as some of the more technical skills, I, did a lot of computer-aided design modeling and stuff, which I still use on occasion to try to help tell some of my stories. I did an article about 3D printing where I helped 3D print the art for the article in the magazine, which is pretty cool. And I did a lot of machine shop work, lathes, mills, welding, that sort of thing, which I still like to do when I have the opportunity. And then, there are a couple programs and stuff that I've learned, especially with doing a lot of newsletter stuff and some back coding and things like that for more visual storytelling and stuff for journalism.
Thanks for watching.